Have you ever seen a foreign minister break the internet? His clips rack up millions of views. His responses at press conferences become headline news across continents. When Dr. S. Jaishankar speaks, the room goes quiet. This isn't your typical diplomatic story. This is about how India's external affairs minister became the most viral diplomat on the planet. His name is Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, former diplomat, career Foreign Service officer, and now the man redefining how a rising power speaks to the world. Love him or disagree with him, you cannot ignore him. Today we're breaking down why Jaishankar has become a global phenomenon. No propaganda, no bias, just the facts behind how one foreign minister changed the game. The rise of a silent warrior, born in 1955 in Delhi, Jaishankar was not born into political royalty. He was not handed power on a silver plate. He studied chemistry. He studied political science. He earned his PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, an institution named after India's first prime minister. The irony? People today say he is the most vocal critic of Nehru's foreign policy decisions. But before we get there, let us talk about what he did for 38 years. 38 years of silence, 38 years of working behind closed doors, 38 years of building relationships, negotiating deals, and serving his country without seeking fame. He served as ambassador to the Czech Republic, to Singapore, to China, to the United States. He was the man behind the India-US nuclear deal, a historic agreement that changed everything. He became Foreign Secretary in 2015, and then in 2018 he retired. Most people would have walked away. Most people would have enjoyed their retirement, but not him. In 2019, he was brought back, not as a diplomat, as a politician, as a cabinet minister, the first former foreign secretary to ever lead India's Ministry of External Affairs as a political leader. And from that moment, everything changed. He was not there to please anyone. S. Jaishankar was there to represent India. Sharp, controlled, unapologetic. For years, global forums had followed a familiar script. Ask India uncomfortable questions. Put it on the defensive. Expect long explanations. Expect moral pressure. This time the script broke. When questioned about India purchasing oil from Russia during the conflict in Ukraine, he did not fold into apology mode. He did not raise his voice. He did not attack. He used arithmetic. If you are looking at energy purchases from Russia, I would suggest your attention should be focused on Europe. We do buy some energy, which is necessary for our energy security, but I suspect our total purchases for the month would be less than what Europe does in an afternoon. No drama, no anger, just proportion. And in that proportion, the argument collapsed. Because how do you counter numbers that expose selective outrage? How do you regain the moral high ground when the comparison is that stark? The conversation changed in that moment. The expectation that India would automatically justify itself disappeared. But he wasn't finished. At the GLOBSEC forum in Bratislava, he delivered another line that traveled far beyond the room. Europe has to get out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems. But the world's problems are not Europe's problems. It was measured, it was diplomatic, and yet it hit with enormous force. Because it voiced something many nations had felt but rarely articulated so directly. The expectation of equal regard, equal sensitivity, equal priority. For Indian audiences, the moment carried weight, not because it was aggressive, but because it was confident. It reflected a country comfortable in its own choices, its own interests, its own voice. This was not defiance for applause, it was clarity, and clarity delivered calmly can be more powerful than outrage. For centuries, the world has operated on the assumption that what matters to Europe matters to everyone. European wars become world wars. European economic problems require global solutions. European security concerns become everyone's security concerns. But when there is conflict in Africa, when there is poverty in Asia, when there are humanitarian crises in the developing world, suddenly these are regional issues, local problems, not worthy of the same global attention or resources. Jaishankar called out this double standard, not in an academic paper that nobody would read, not in a private diplomatic conversation, but in a public forum, in front of European leaders, in clear and unmistakable language. The moderator tried to push back. He asked Jaishankar a question designed to corner him. If India had to choose between the US and China, which side would India pick? His response was equally powerful. I do not accept that India has to join either the US axis or China axis. We are one-fifth of the world's population, fifth or sixth largest economy in the world. We are entitled to weigh our own side. There it was. Simple, clear, unapologetic. India would not be forced to choose. India would chart its own course. India would make decisions based on India's interests, not based on what Washington or Beijing or Brussels expected. Now, you might expect that critics would praise Jaishankar for defending India's interests, but that is not what happened. Instead, many critics, particularly those within India itself, call him aggressive. They call him too nationalist. They say he is divisive. They say he has abandoned the principles India was built on. Today, S. Jaishankar often reminds global audiences of India's scale, its economic rise, and its thousands of years of history. He argues that such a nation should make its own choices. In a world shaped by many centers of power, he maintains that India will not enter permanent camps. Partnerships can change from issue to issue, but the guiding test remains the national interest. Supporters see this not as a break from the past, but as continuity, an old idea expressed in a new era. The world will never forget big ideas are important, but for many people, the real connection with S. Jaishankar comes from certain unforgettable moments. At one public event, a Pakistani journalist tried to put India in the same bracket as others while talking about terrorism. Many watching felt the comparison was unfair. Jaishankar stayed calm. No anger, no shouting. He simply said that if someone wanted to know about Pakistan's actions, they should ask Pakistan's leaders, not India's. For his supporters, that reply meant everything. They saw confidence. They saw clarity. They saw a representative who would not accept a narrative he believed was wrong. In that moment, many Indians felt their country stood tall. There was also a lighter moment that showed his sense of humor. In an interview, a reporter tried to trap him with a forced choice: dinner with Kim Jong-un or George Soros. Either answer could have created headlines. S. Jaishankar simply smiled and replied that it was Navratri and he was fasting. The room laughed. With one line, he avoided the trap without sounding angry or defensive. Another widely discussed episode came after remarks by Eric Garcetti about India's Citizenship Amendment Act. Instead of escalating tensions, Jaishankar answered with calm confidence. He said the matter could be explained with warmth and patience. He then noted that other countries also have provisions that prioritize certain communities in immigration or citizenship processes. His argument was that debates should recognize international comparisons, not treat India as unique. Supporters felt the response was firm yet measured. Rather than anger, he used composure and facts, and that, for many watching, left a strong impression. At this point, you might think you understand why Jaishankar is popular. He is articulate. He defends India well. He does not back down. He exposes hypocrisy. But there is something deeper, something more profound, something that connects him to ordinary Indians in a way that most politicians never achieve. It is because he gives voice to what millions of Indians already feel but may not always be able to express. When he pushes back against criticism that many consider unfair, supporters feel he is channeling their own frustration at seeing the country judged by different standards. It is because people believe his views come from listening. They feel he understands what ordinary Indians think and feel, and that he carries those emotions with him when he speaks abroad. That sense of being heard is a major reason why many admire him. He speaks because India has been silent for too long. He pushes back because India has been pushed around for too long. He stands firm because India has bent over backward for too long, trying to win approval from people who would never give it. Indians, especially young Indians, finally see someone who does not bow down, someone who does not apologize for being Indian, someone who walks into the world's most prestigious forums and makes it absolutely clear: India is not seeking approval anymore. India is demanding respect. There is something deeply emotional about this for Indians. For generations, they have watched their leaders be deferential to the West. They have watched Indian diplomats carefully phrase their statements to avoid offending anyone. They have watched India be lectured by countries with far worse records on human rights, democracy, and international law. And now finally they see someone who refuses to accept that, someone who calls out the hypocrisy, someone who stands tall. It is not just about policy. It is about dignity. It is about self-respect. It is about refusing to be treated as inferior. S. Jaishankar is admired not just for sharp words, but for how clearly he reads the modern world. His view of diplomacy fits an age where power is spread out and partnerships change from issue to issue. He has described today's order as similar to coalition politics. Combinations shift, priorities evolve, and success depends on staying nimble. In such a system, rigidity can be costly, while flexibility creates room to protect national interest. From that approach comes his core principle: decisions must serve India. New Delhi may cooperate with one country on a particular matter and with another elsewhere, but the compass remains the same. What benefits the nation while preserving strategic autonomy? Some in the West prefer clearer alignments, hoping India will become a permanent partner in balancing China. Yet Jaishankar's stance is that India will engage widely, with Western countries, with Russia, and even with China where practical, despite ongoing complexities. But there is another aspect to Jaishankar's approach that is often overlooked, and it is perhaps the most important. He understands that in the modern world, diplomacy is not just about private negotiations behind closed doors. It is about public discourse. It is about shaping narratives. It is about winning the battle of perceptions. He explained this clearly. I believe we live in a world where diplomacy is also more of public discourse. This is crucial. In an era of social media, of 24-hour news cycles, of instant global communication, what you say publicly matters as much as what you negotiate privately. And this is where Jaishankar excels. He knows how to use public forums. He knows how to craft statements that resonate. He knows how to deliver messages that go viral. But there is a balance to be struck. When do you speak publicly? When do you stay silent? When asked about this, he gave a remarkably candid answer. Your first question I put differently. You are asking me, when do you keep your mouth shut and when do you open your mouth? That is what you are asking. The audience laughed, but then he got serious. My answer is actually, it depends on the situation. You know, you'd be surprised how much I don't speak. You can't make a reel of some guy who doesn't speak. This is important. For all his viral moments, for all his famous statements, he is saying that he actually speaks selectively. He chooses his moments carefully. And then he explained why sometimes he does speak publicly. Today it is not only multipolar, it is also very competitive. If you don't speak, if you don't set out a point, they think that by pushing you, you will be on the defensive. You will apologize. So it is important to raise your voice. I'm not saying you should raise it every time. I think that is a judgment. This is the key insight. In a competitive world, silence is interpreted as weakness. If you do not push back, people assume they can push you further. For decades, India stayed silent in the face of criticism. And what happened? The criticism increased. The double standards became worse. India was constantly on the defensive. Jaishankar changed that. He raised his voice. Not always, not on everything, but strategically on issues that matter. And suddenly the dynamic changed. Suddenly people thought twice before criticizing India, because they knew there might be a response. And that response might expose their own hypocrisy. Others say he is moving away from India's traditional diplomacy, that he is abandoning non-alignment, that he is destroying Nehru's legacy, that he is making India into a divisive, polarizing force in global affairs. But is he? Really? Or is he adapting Nehru's vision to a world that has changed completely? Nehru refused to join blocs during the Cold War when the world was bipolar. Jaishankar refuses to join permanent blocs in a multipolar world. Nehru asserted India's autonomy when India was weak. Jaishankar asserts India's autonomy when India is strong. Nehru spoke as an equal to Western leaders, even when India lacked the power to back up that equality. Jaishankar speaks as an equal to Western leaders because India now has the power to back up that equality. The critics are not upset because Jaishankar has abandoned Nehru's principles. They are upset because he is executing those principles too effectively. Because he is doing what Nehru wanted to do but often could not because India lacked the power. Nehru had the vision. Jaishankar has the vision and the power to make it real. They say he is destroying the legacy of India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. They say he represents everything Nehru stood against. But are they right? Is Jaishankar really the opposite of Nehru? Is he really abandoning India's foundational principles? Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister, believed in one thing above everything else when it came to foreign policy: strategic autonomy. India would not be a puppet of any superpower. India would not become a client state. India would not bow down to anyone, whether it was the United States or the Soviet Union. During the Cold War, the world was divided into two blocks. You were either with America or with the Soviet Union. There was no middle ground. Countries were expected to choose, but Nehru refused. He, along with leaders like Egypt's Nasser and Yugoslavia's Tito, founded the non-aligned movement. India would remain non-aligned. India would maintain its strategic autonomy. And in 1948, at the United Nations General Assembly, Nehru stood before the world's most powerful nations and told them something they did not want to hear. You will not solve your problems by thinking that the problems of the world are mainly European problems. Does that sound familiar? Because 75 years later, Jaishankar said almost the exact same thing. Different words, yes. Different context, absolutely. But the same message, the same fire, the same refusal to accept that Europe's problems should dominate the world's attention. Jawaharlal Nehru believed India belonged at the world's top table, not because the country was rich or militarily powerful then, but because of its civilizational depth and its long contribution to knowledge, culture, and trade. And that terrifies people who benefited from the old order. People who were comfortable with India being weak, being deferential, being grateful for whatever crumbs fell from the table. So what really sets Jaishankar apart? What makes him different from every other external affairs minister India has had? Here is the thing. He is not a career politician who became a diplomat to serve in some posting abroad. He is a career diplomat who became a politician. 38 years in the Indian Foreign Service. Experience working under both Congress and BJP governments, proving he is not just a party loyalist, but a professional who serves India regardless of who is in power. He played a key role under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's United Progressive Alliance government during the historic nuclear deal negotiations with the United States. That was a Congress-led government. He served with equal dedication and effectiveness. He served as Foreign Secretary under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a BJP-led government, again with the same professionalism and effectiveness. In January 2019, he was awarded the Padma Shri, India's fourth highest civilian honor, for his contributions to public affairs. He knows how the system works. He knows how negotiations happen. He knows what works and what does not. He has been in the rooms where decisions are made. He has built relationships with foreign leaders and diplomats over decades. When he speaks, it is not political rhetoric divorced from reality. It is informed by deep experience and knowledge. But more importantly, he has credibility. When he speaks, people listen, not just because of his political position, but because of his expertise, his track record, his ability to deliver on what he promises. And here is something crucial about his style. He is calm, he is composed, he does not shout, he does not get agitated, he does not panic. Even when challenged, even when attacked, even when backed into a corner by hostile questioning, he remains in control. His voice stays steady. His arguments stay logical. His demeanor stays professional. That control, that confidence, that clarity makes him impossible to ignore and very difficult to dismiss. When he delivers a cutting response to a journalist or a foreign leader, it lands harder because it is delivered calmly. There is no anger to dismiss as emotion. There is no shouting to dismiss as lack of control. Just facts, logic, and a quiet confidence that is absolutely devastating. So why is Jaishankar so popular? Let us cut through everything and get to the core truth. He is popular because he says what people feel, not what they are supposed to feel, not what is politically correct, but what they actually feel deep in their hearts. He is popular because he stands when others bow, because he speaks when others stay silent, because he pushes back when others accept. He is popular because he refuses to accept double standards. When Europe lectures India about democracy while maintaining relationships with authoritarian regimes for economic benefits, he calls it out. When America criticizes India's laws while having similar laws itself, he points it out. When China acts aggressively on the border and then talks about peace, he does not pretend to believe it. He is popular because he does not apologize for being Indian, for representing an Indian perspective, for putting India's interests first, and most importantly, he is popular because after decades of being told to stay quiet, to be grateful, to know their place, Indians finally have someone who speaks, someone who pushes back, someone who demands respect instead of begging for it. He is not just a diplomat, he is a symbol of a new India that refuses to play by the old rules, a symbol of a nation that is done being lectured by people who have no moral authority to lecture, a symbol of a civilization that is reclaiming its rightful place in the world. And that is why the world watches him so carefully. That is why his every statement is analyzed. That is why he makes people uncomfortable. Because deep down they know the era of telling India what to do is ending. The era of India being grateful for symbolic gestures is over. The era of India seeking validation from the West is finished. India is writing its own story now, on its own terms, according to its own values, in pursuit of its own interests. And Jaishankar is holding the pen. He is showing the world that India is not here to fit into someone else's world order. India is here to shape a world order that works for everyone, including the billions of people in the global south who have been ignored for too long. He is showing that strength does not require aggression, that confidence does not require arrogance, that asserting your rights does not require denying others theirs. He is showing that a truly multipolar world is possible, where no single country or bloc dominates, where everyone has a voice, where power is balanced, where respect is mutual. And he is doing it one speech at a time, one press conference at a time, one diplomatic engagement at a time. This is not the end of the story. This is just the beginning. Because India's rise is not about one man. It is about a nation of 1.4 billion people finding their collective voice again. Jaishankar is not creating this moment. He is channeling it. He is expressing it. He is giving it shape and direction. And the world is watching, some with admiration, some with envy, some with concern, some with hope. But everyone is watching. So here is the question that nobody wants to answer, the question that makes people uncomfortable, the question that challenges everything we have been told about how the world works. If one man with a microphone and a calm voice can change how the entire world sees a nation of 1.4 billion people, what happens when that entire nation decides to stand up together? What happens when 1.4 billion people refuse to accept being treated as inferior? What happens when the world's oldest continuous civilization decides it is time to reclaim its place? What happens when patience runs out and silence turns into voice? The world is about to find out. And Jaishankar is just showing them a preview.